All right, this is January 6th, 2019. So over the past weekend, I wanted to add a bit more substrate to my tanks and to give my plants a little bit better depth for root growth. And here's what the results are. So I ended up using blasting sand from Menards to add to these tanks. So it's real cheap. It's like, I don't know, $9 for a 50-pound bag. And I used one bag to add about a 1-inch layer in this 75-gallon. So that's all the black blasting sand. And then from here on down to probably here is Echo Complete. So there's a good amount of Echo Complete in there. That was my original substrate. Echo Complete was great. I do see some advantages on the sand so far, or the sand being at the top. The first is this fine grained sand holds the plants really well. So it does a really good job of holding the roots in place. So that's pretty neat. I do like the look. It seems to reflect, and I could see the fish a bit better. Instead of being a solid black, it's kind of it almost gives an appearance of a tan, because there's black mixed in with some really fine specks. I haven't really noticed the loaches digging yet. They skate along the top really well, but I haven't noticed them digging in any parts of the tank. But it's only been a couple days. They like to dig under these little tunnel systems, so they may end up digging under here. So I like that so far. The black blasting sand, I do highly recommend rinsing pretty well. It puts off an oil that is kind of a black oil that really is kind of nasty. It's kind of like an oil slick. So I rinsed it really well in a bucket and then put it in by hand with the tank sort of half drained. And then I did a couple, once I was done, this is like 3 water changes later, just because I wanted to get as much of that film, which I really don't see much anymore. It's probably mixed in now that we've been bubbling and circulating for a couple days, but it was kind of gross. So rinse it as well as you can. You're going to get some of that. From what I've read, it's not a big deal to the fish. There's a few posts online that go into detail, that's really not a big deal, and they didn't rinse it as well as mine, and you could see sort of the black foamy stuff that you get on the top of the tank. So that's the 75. I did the same thing with my naturally lit 38-gallon guppy tank. So I put about half a bag in here, which also gave about 1 inch. And this I don't get the best light on just because it's shining right at the camera there. That's not too bad. So the cories seem to, the bottom dwellers seem to dig it so far. Everybody's eating this morning. So similar thing over here. I just added about a 1-inch cap. Now I have a measuring stick that this is at, I think it's 4, 5, and 6 inches. So we're at almost, right at 5 inches of depth of substrate in this tank, which is overkill, I think, but plenty of room for the roots to set up shop. I think that's going to be really nice with the sand to hold them down. And then the Echo Complete, which is great for the planted tanks below for the roots to get into once they sort of make it through the 1-inch sand barrier. And then one more. So then I also redid my office tank, similar fashion. About a 1-inch. This is half a bag, well rinsed. It's a little dwarf frog. They've got some food in there I put in there earlier. This has my male guppies in here as they grow up in the other tank, which has a lot of babies. They get moved over to here. But similar results here so far. I have some dwarf lobsters in here somewhere. You can see one hiding back there. They seem to really, it was interesting with the Echo Complete only, they would sort of pick up pieces and try to build little sand barrier or gravel barriers with it. I haven't noticed any of them digging in the sand yet, but I do notice they really haul tail. So when they want to move around, they can move around to the other side of the tank really quickly on top of this sand. They moved a lot slower having to crawl over that Echo Complete. So good, bad, or indifferent. It's just an observation so far. So pretty happy with the sand. Again, both of the 38 gallons. It's probably a total of maybe 3 water changes, 2 or 3 on the smaller ones to get it clear. And this tank was done yesterday. So the tank had been set up a while, rinsed the sand, drained it, put some of it in by hand, filled it up, drained it again, put the rest of it in by hand, and then one more water change to get out a lot of that sliminess that gets along the top. And I'm probably going to do one more in the next couple days just to make sure I got as much of that black oily stuff out of there as possible. You know, I could tell putting the sand in, I would have it on my hands. You'd feel a little oil from that blasting media, and it got on my, you know, the little plastic cup I was using to fill it in. It had a little bit of an oil slick on it. So just be mindful of that. It's going to be a little bit of cleaning, but I don't really think there's going to be any issues beyond that. It's supposed to be inert and seems to hold its place pretty well. You know, if I don't know if I want to do it. I guess I could do a little bit here. So it doesn't really, you know, when you kick it up, it sort of settles back in its own place pretty quickly. So even though it's really fine, I don't think there's going to be much of an issue with it, you know, getting sucked up into my filter or anything. I do have to be careful with the Python. You know, the Python, I could just jam it into the Echo Complete and do a water change pretty easily. With this, you know, that Python will just suck this sand right up if I just leave it sit. So I just have to be a little more mindful on my water changes to not pull a bunch of sand out at the same time. So that's it. That's my experience updating 3 tanks, adding in blasting sand, just cheap hardware store sand in as a substrate on my tanks.